Hi, Seals. Welcome back. I've been in school today. It was nice to be in and did some PE with some of the kids. Um, and we're going to continue reading our story. Got my special guest here again today. She's sleeping, as she always does. And okay, so we're on chapter 18, and Grandad's just about to explain to Oscar and Tilly what the underlibrary is and what everything is, because Grandad used to be the librarian of the underlibrary. The chapter is called "Some Books Are Far Safer Than Others." Book wandering is the ability to travel inside books, and only a few readers can do it. You could say we can read a bit harder than most people. Something tips us over from visiting the books purely inside our imagination to being physically transported there. We still don't know precisely how it happens and why book wandering magic affects some people and not others. We think any reader probably has the potential to do it, but perhaps predictably there are very high numbers of booksellers or librarians, as book wanderers almost always have a very special or particular relationship with books and reading. It's this intense relationship that first starts pulling characters out of books, and why your first book wanderer is normally into a book you have an affinity with, which is why it's more unusual to find out that you are also able to travel into Anne of Green Gables, Oscar, even though you have never read it. Pulling characters out of their stories into the real world is actually more of a side effect, but it is almost always the way that we first realise someone has book wandering abilities. And, as far as we can tell, book wandering always takes place in a bookshop or library. So, I pulled Anne and Alice out of their books without even trying to, Tilly asked. How come I haven't done that too? Oscar said at the same time. I know you're going to have an awful lot of questions about this, but most of these questions will be covered in your induction session with one of the librarians, and I expect they'll be able to do it in a way that's more manageable and enjoyable than my fact dumping. Actually, do you think we can squeeze one in today, Amelia? Amelia gave a small nod and went over to her desk and made a quiet phone call. They'll be able to teach you how to control your book wandering, Grandad went on. The Underlibrary exists to protect readers and our stories, and we have important rules in place to help do this. As I'm sure you can imagine, some books are far safer than others to explore, and we've had some pretty close calls in the past when people have pulled through all sorts of unsavoury characters when their abilities awoke. Remind me to tell you about Gary and the Orc one day. Now, as Amelia mentioned, I used to be the librarian. I retired just after you were born, Tilly, as your grandma and I decided that with your mum not being around and us both getting older, we would stay put at Pages & Co., especially as we didn't know whether you'd turn out to be a book wanderer or not. Amelia had now finished her phone call and was tapping her fingernails quietly but insistently on her desk. When Grandad paused, she broke in. Archie, do you think that? Grandad stopped her immediately and received a sharp, raised eyebrow response. I realise that there is more to this story, but I think it's best to let Tilly and Oscar get used to the basics first. Don't you agree? Grandad said, nodding his thanks. I want to hear the whole story, Tilly said instantly. This is just the basics, Oscar said under his breath, shaking his head. I think you have more than enough to wrap your head around for now, Tilly. And for Amelia, if at all possible, I'd appreciate you letting the other librarians know that we're just going to let the underlibrary and the idea of bookworming sink in a bit with Tilly and Oscar before we go into any more details. There's nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart, he added to Tilly. She wasn't worried until you said that, Oscar interjected, earning a hard stare from Grandad. Could my mum book wander? Tilly asked quietly. She could, yes, love, Grandad answered. Tilly couldn't tell if the cracks in her heart were getting a little wider or healing ever so slightly. You're so much like her, Matilda. I don't want to make you feel like Harry Potter, but you really do have her eyes, Amelia said, and Oscar struggled to suppress a giggle. You knew her, Tilly said. Why, yes, we actually went to university together. She would have so loved to hear about your first book wander. Anyway, there'll be a time to reminisce soon enough. Let's go and find the reference librarian to get you two registered, she said, giving both Oscar and Tilly an encouraging nod. They went back out into the long corridor and walked a few meters down to a door while the number was covered by a handwritten sign in spidery letters that read, "By appointment only." "Ignore that," Amelia said. "Much as he hates it, I am still his boss, and definitely do not need an appointment to go and see him." She pushed the door open at the same time as knocking, and the others followed her into a room that was almost identical in shape and size to hers, but much more sparsely furnished and with walls covered with metal filing cabinets and shelves full of huge uniform-sized books. "I do not tolerate people opening my door without a knock." "Ah, good afternoon, Miss Whisper. I see you have guests," an icy voice said. "You!" breathed Tilly as Enoch Chalk turned round to face them. Ooh, so the man to go and register as book wanderers was Enoch Chalk, the man who's been going in the stories. So that's interesting. So maybe he was trying to find Tilly and Oscar to tell them they need to register. We'll have to find out, won't we? Okay, have a lovely bank holiday weekend. And I will see you soon. Bye.